Strap in as I speak with John, a personal financial planner familiar with Europe, as we compare and contrast Portugal and Spain.
So there is actually only one category in which Portugal is now, it's assumed the lead.
We talk real estate.
It's been a hot market.
Okay. Taxation.
Kind of like the United States, Spain has regional taxation,
Yeah.
and Portugal doesn't. So each of the autonomous communities inside of Spain has its own tax code.
We also discuss special taxes that could incentivize or discourage you from moving.
The Beckham law only applies to internally sourced domestic income. And so they rewrote the rules so that they can get the types of workers that they really do want.
And we introduce other financial considerations that might motivate you to leave your home country.
But then there's also healthcare, which is a huge budget offset.
All right, John, we're going to go through some financial criteria for the different comparisons we're going to make between Spain and Portugal. Let's start out with cost of living differences.
All right, cost of living. Which one do you think is more expensive?
Spain.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Expensive across the board. Just about every category is more. About 8 or 7% more. So it's not a huge difference.
Right.
But it's a difference. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
What are we seeing in terms of cost of living in the real estate market for rents? Like what's the variance there? Because it's gone up quite a bit in Portugal. So what do you know?
I lied. So there is actually only one category in which Portugal is now, it's assumed the lead.
Yeah.
So you have Lisbon about 8% more expensive than Barcelona at this point in time.
Yeah.
Which is wild because Lisbon, it's a great city, but I don't think most of the world would consider it to be like a direct comparison with Barcelona.
Yeah.
But it's more expensive.
Yeah. What attributes this rise that's happened in Portugal, or at least in Lisbon, compared to the major cities of Spain?
It's been a hot market.
Okay.
Condé Nast has been rating it #1 in terms of places to retire for the last several years.
Yeah.
And that has been having a pronounced effect. Just think about how small it is.
Yes.
And so how easily the needle shifts when you get 10, 15, 20,000 new millionaires moving to town. So it didn't take a lot of excess attention, and it got it. So now there's the effects.
Yeah, and there were some other reasons why people wanted to move to Portugal, like taxation. The taxation's better in Portugal, at least under NHR. Now that NHR is gone, what can we look at in terms of taxation now?
So I just spent the whole week hanging out with a Spanish tax lawyer.
Okay.
Awesome week. But we were talking about this constantly. They're the same. In terms of the actual tax brackets, you were paying almost exactly the same, with I think Spain being just a tiny bit more expensive in terms of overall taxation on income than Portugal.
Okay.
But for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much on the same level.
Okay. Did this person talk any about Beckham's law?
Yeah. So Beckham's law is, I think, a really good corollary to the NHR.
Okay. How so?
Situation. So the Beckham law is going to apply a cap, I think, of 28%, if I'm not mistaken, on your income tax. And so, as we said, both of the countries have very high taxation relative to the United States of America.
Right.
With 48 and 47% for Portugal and for Spain, respectively, being the top tax bracket once you exceed a very relatively low income. Okay. So the Beckham law is very similar to the NHR in that you have that cap on your income tax.
Right.
Okay. So far, very similar to the old 20% cap on income tax for the NHR. Big difference is NHR is geared towards externally sourced income. Okay?
Right.
So it's really great for people who are working abroad for an American company. The Beckham law only applies to internally sourced domestic income. So when David Beckham came to live in Spain,
yes,
he said, I'll move here if the work that I do here can be taxed at a lower rate. Right? But that's different than externally sourced income.
Sure. Super
different. So if you're a teleworker and you're moving to Spain, it is not nearly as useful to you,
right,
the Beckham law, as NHR would be.
Okay. So for the remote workers, it's not as useful.
No.
Did he do that because contracts with Adidas would then become like locally sourced income because he was living in Spain? Is that how it kind of came about? Because didn't it have to do with endorsements and income that he was making from abroad? Wasn't that
I
part of
didn't
it?
read the whole story.
Okay.
I mean, I came to this kind of late in the game.
Yeah,
and I'm not even a big sports fanatic.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that it exists.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that they rewrote the law in 2010.
Okay.
So that it excludes professional athletes. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So think about how funny that is.
Once he left, they were like, all right, let's rewind.
Yeah,
this.
let's not do that again. It was kind of like the
Interesting.
Eduardo Saverin in the United States, the co-founder of Facebook.
Facebook, yeah.
Once he expatriated and took a huge amount of Facebook stock with him,
Yes.
and he didn't get taxed, they rewrote the laws later.
Right.
So that they could not allow that to happen again.
Yeah. He took off to Singapore.
He took off to Singapore.
Okay.
And with David Beckham, they look back on that and they said, well, and there was a lot of criticism that they received in the press. So I did read this part of the story. Apparently, everybody got really mad because there was this perception that celebrity athletes could move to Spain and just get off easy.
Right.
And so they rewrote the rules so that they can get the types of workers that they really do want, which is, professional educators, scientists, technology professionals. So that's what they want, and they want them to work in Spain.
Okay. All right. So looking still at taxation, there's a couple other taxes that Spain has that I don't think Portugal has. Talking about the inheritance tax, right, and the exit tax.
Right.
Is there anything similar to Portugal, and can you explain a bit more about the inheritance tax and the exit tax?
Yeah. So I think it's useful to point out that kind of like the United States, Spain has regional taxation.
Yeah.
And Portugal doesn't. So each of the autonomous communities inside of Spain has its own tax code.
Right.
And so you're going to be taxed at the federal level, but then the local municipalities can differ. So with that in mind, we look at the death tax. There are some places in Spain where there's not really a death tax.
Okay.
For example, in Madrid, in the capital,
Yeah.
you're going to actually be refunded on 99% of the death tax. And I should back up and say that the death tax is going to be somewhere from, I think it's 16 to 38%, depending on a number, like a number of variables. Like if you're already wealthy, then you're going to get taxed more when you receive an estate.
Okay.
So it's a lot. But Portugal, on the other hand, has a 10% stamp duty that's imposed on the estates when you inherit them.
Okay.
But they don't actually levy that if you're a direct family member.
Right.
So like, if you're one step removed, if you're, a mother, father, child, son, or a sibling, you don't get taxed at all.
You can just pass property or assets over to that person and it's all good.
Yeah, fully.
Yeah.
Although there is a forced inheritance scheme here in Portugal, meaning you're going to see your estate probated. The state's going to step in and they're going to divvy things up to your children, regardless of what you want.
Right.
Whereas in the States, you can generally write a will that will step around any kind of local guidelines with regards to inheritance.
Yeah, I mean, this is where someone that is moving from abroad to Portugal really needs to have a lawyer look at what their will is. How does their will from the US, for example, translate to Portugal? Because there are some things that you might have in your American will that are illegal, right, in Portugal.
Right.
Yeah, I think you can't disown a kid unless like a few criteria are met.
Here
and
you
it's
cannot.
Really strong, the
Exactly.
criteria. Yeah.
Here you cannot.
Yeah.
That's right. And so you've got to go through that. And it's really easy to diffuse that situation by just creating a simple will in Portugal that says, look back to my US-based estate planning. That's all you need to say.
Okay.
But if you don't say it, then you're going to be forced into their inheritance scheme.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you're passing it directly to either kids or parents, no tax.
Zero.
But what happens in Spain? You said that there's a federal tax and then also a community tax. What are some of the communities that you know of that are, let's say, better to move to?
Better to move to.
Yeah, and those
I know.
Or worse.
So there's Catalonia, and then there's the Basque
Country. País Vasco.
Yeah, those are the hardest.
Okay.
They generally take it into their hands to sort of amp up the taxes on just about every conceivable level.
Okay.
So if you're going to move to Catalonia or to the Basque Country, you watch out. There's a wicked edge to the tax guidelines there.
Okay.
But if you're moving to Madrid, it's on the far other end of things. Madrid actually tends to rebate back
Okay.
a lot of the extra taxes that are assessed at the federal level to you there.
Nice.
So that's interesting. And so do the islands. So if
Okay.
you're going to move to the Canary Islands, or I can't remember, there's one other island municipality where you can move, and they're going to make it easier on you, not harder.
Good.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
interesting.
And then the exit tax, what's that all about?
So there is an exit tax that's assessed in Spain, and it's assessed on very low levels of assets that individuals have when they leave the country.
Okay.
And so the assessment is on capital gains. So basically, any asset that you own that has increased in value, we're going to watermark
While you've
that.
lived in Spain?
While you've lived in Spain, and that you have acquired while you're in Spain.
Okay.
So you get it like a prenuptial agreement on everything that you bring with you.
Okay.
They're not going to be assessing that stuff.
Okay, good.
But what they're saying is, just like in any marriage, this happened while you were connected to Spain.
Yeah.
So if you're going to break up with me,
Yeah.
there's going to be some pain.
Like you've economically benefited from being here,
Yes.
whether you did or not.
Right.
They want some of that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like you got to enjoy the benefit of being connected to this
Yeah.
whole situation. And so when you leave, they're like, okay, let's just watermark the assets. And you're going to pay for those gains while you leave. So if you got $1 million in, pick whatever stock you love, even if it was U.S.-based stock, but you gained it while you were in Spain, they're going to actually force you to reassess the value of that as you leave, and pay an exit tax based on capital gains.
That was going to be my question. So if you acquired like Apple stock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's everyone's favorite stock to compare.
Yeah.
And if you gained it, I mean, a year ago.
Yeah.
As of today, not so much this year. But yeah, if you got that stock and then you leave, they're going to go, okay, goodbye, but you bought that stock for $1 million and it's worth $1.5 million.
Okay.
So there's $500,000 in capital gain that's assessed on the stocks, even if you're not selling it.
What percentage do they hit you with?
It's the high 20s. I don't remember exactly what it is.
Wow.
Well, I mean, in the US, it's 20%.
Yeah.
Long-term cap gains, or 15.
Will you get hit, as an American, would you get hit with that back in the US as well?
No.
Or would there be some sort of taxation?
Well, yes, no, and yes.
Okay.
So there is an exit tax that the US assesses. But like what's interesting with the US is if you're a US citizen, you're assumed to remain a tax citizen wherever you go in the world.
You got to file.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
Right. And 99% of the rest of the world, when you're leaving, you're not becoming a tax resident next year, you're gone.
Yeah.
That you're completely off the system and you're no longer required to file, etc.
Okay.
And so, like, if you think about that fact, it makes sense that they're going to assess that tax on the way out.
Okay.
Because they're just assuming that you're just gone so long.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, you're not assessed the exit tax unless you file for a breakup. You give up your passport.
Okay.
You expatriate fully.
Okay.
Which most Americans are not at all interested in doing.
Right.
So that's a very rare
renouncing
circumstance.
citizenship.
Yes, renouncing citizenship is so rare.
Yeah, it's like a couple $1,000s to do as well, to renounce your citizenship.
Costs money.
Yeah.
Like you've got to like turn your back on the United States of America. And you're going to pay lots of extra taxes on your Social Security, all kinds of other downstream problems.
So this is something that you don't have to be concerned with in Portugal. There's no exit tax.
No.
So it's really, we've looked at cost of living, which is basically a tie, right? Taxation, which is basically a tie. But then you have these two special taxes, which Portugal's better. Portugal would be the win there. Right. Where should we go next?
Should go next. I guess, pensioners, pension income is going to be received in both countries at about the same rate.
Which is how much?
Which is progressive rates.
Oh, okay.
So it's just going to be attributed to the standard 0 to 48% taxes.
Got it.
So you're not going to get any gimmies on your Social Security, for example.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. At what point does it maybe make sense to not consider Portugal and Spain in terms of how much you're making from your pension? What I mean by that is like, where is it maybe more economically sound to just stay in the US on your income levels, your pension levels, compared to moving abroad and like enjoying European lifestyle and not being taxed out the wazoo?
I mean, that's super interesting because I think the primary considerations are your overall tax structure.
Okay.
Are you going to be taxed much more in Portugal or in Spain than you were back in the States.
Mm.
But then there's also healthcare,
Okay.
which is a huge budget offset,
Okay.
right? Because if you get universal healthcare in Europe, that is a huge burden that is lifted off of your budget.
Sure.
Especially
Thousands.
for particular people.
Right.
Some people, I mean, it varies wildly on this.
Yeah.
If you have advanced healthcare needs that are going to be fully covered here,
Yeah.
without having to pay excessive premiums, other healthcare costs, Europe can be a godsend.
Okay.
Right? But then if you're just living like a normal everyday existence and you're going to live, you know, in the non-expensive parts of the U.S., like if you're living in the flyover states like I did for a long time in Iowa, if I'm living in Iowa on a fixed income with Social Security being a major part of my income, just stay. Like,
Okay.
Because life is good and inexpensive, and you don't get a huge benefit to moving to Europe in those cases.
Okay, so really when we're talking about pensioners, it's a push, it's a tie in that category as well.
Unless you get the NHR. The NHR was the big
one,
for Portugal, which is why you're seeing this popularity shift.
Right.
Or at least this question.
This is why we're having this conversation now, right?
Because it's like, what?
First it was a no-brainer. Now it's like, okay, well, I've got to think. Would I rather learn Portuguese or would I rather learn Spanish? Would I rather live amongst the Spanish or live amongst the Portuguese?
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Spanish is so much easier, I think.
As a language.
Yeah.
Okay, so last criteria to talk about in this video, real estate.
Yeah.
What are you seeing right now in the real estate market? Where might a better investment be between Portugal and Spain? What do you think?
Well, unless you're trying to qualify for citizenship-based investment, right?
Yeah.
Which is gone. Like a lot of people were doing the golden visa
by real estate. Yeah.
In Portugal, it's gone.
Yes.
You can still do it in Spain.
Yeah.
So that's a consideration.
Yeah.
But you know, real estate
at least in
broadly,
2024, there's some changes that could happen with residential real estate for sure, but could also be commercial. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's a great point. Like changes happen all the time.
Yeah.
So we'll do one of these like in 6 months, it seems like.
Yeah.
But real estate is really close together in both countries in terms of overall cost.
Yeah.
Outside of the big cities, there's a very narrow difference in overall pricing relative to the housing stock.
Okay.
But if you're living in the cities, Lisbon is too expensive. Porto has gotten incredibly expensive right now. So come and rent and enjoy. But Spain actually has the edge in terms of value. And it's not a massive edge, okay?
Yeah.
But they do have a slight edge as of this video in 2024.
Okay.
So that's a consideration.
Any places in Spain that you kind of have your eye on as being good markets for people to consider?
Well, despite what we said earlier with regards to overall taxation, the northern regions of Spain tends to have a lot of good value right now.
Okay.
So the Catalan area actually is beautiful, and you can get some good property values.
Okay.
It's very distinct culturally as well, so it can be a lot of fun. The urban centers are pretty steady values. They haven't changed a lot over the years, and right now they're also having kind of a nice tech boom.
Okay.
But then again, so is Portugal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So it's all relative to what you really what you like.
So people shouldn't really make a decision based on maybe gains. They should do it more on lifestyle.
I know, as a financial advisor, I would love to be able to like drop the bomb on this one. But
right.
It's what you love.
Yeah.
Really, it's a matter of taste in this because they're both relatively similar. When it comes to total value.
John, thanks so much for joining me here. I appreciate it. If you want to see more on Portugal versus Spain, we go into a deeper conversation right here in this podcast episode. Until next time, let's get moving. Bye.